My true story from Michigan. She drew a picture that made my blood run cold. When I asked why, she whispered, "That's what he does when no one's looking." They called it imagination. The police called it evidence. Brian slammed his hand on the table, rattling the glasses. "Jesus Christ, Helen, every damn dinner turns into this paranoid crap. If you think we're trying to poison you, then leave. Seriously, get out. Cram your tinfoil hats and just go." Kelly stood still, her face tight. "You're unbelievable. Do you think you're so important we would waste time trying to kill you? If someone did, it would be a blessing." They called it a dinner to celebrate my recovery, but there was nothing celebratory about it. Kelly had invited a few neighbors, some church ladies she barely liked, and Brian sat at the head of the table, like a king at a feast he did not pay for. The table was dressed with candles, fancy napkins folded into triangles, and plates of golden, bubbling lasagna steaming under the chandelier light. Everyone had a full meal in front of them: salad, breadsticks, lasagna, wine. Everyone except me. I had a bowl. A single bowl of thin grayish soup with a faint smell of something like chicken but none of the substance. No noodles, no meat, no bread. Just that pale broth and a spoon placed carefully beside it, as if I were a toddler being humored. I looked around. No one said anything. Not even Emma, my granddaughter, who sat quietly next to me, glancing between my soup and her overflowing plate. I cleared my throat. Why am I not eating what everyone else is? Kelly turned from the kitchen counter, wiping her hands on a towel. She smiled, that tight artificial smile she reserved for guests and camera lenses. "Because the lasagna is heavy, Mom. It has meat, cheese, garlic, all things that upset your stomach. You said so yourself." "I said it once," I replied. 2 years ago, after surgery. I'm fine now," says the woman who fell down the stairs 2 months ago. Brian muttered from across the table. I ignored him. I turned to Emma. "Sweetheart, would you like to try Grandma's soup?" She looked up at me, then at her mother, and was about to reach for my spoon when Kelly snapped, "No! She doesn't need to eat that. It's not for her." Everyone froze. "Why not?" I asked. Kelly walked over to me, her voice calm but low, like someone trying not to explode in front of company. "Because it's made for your diet, Mom. Special ingredients. We don't want to upset your system. You should be grateful I took the time to make something separate." "Then eat it yourself," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I pushed the bowl toward her. "If it's that good, if it's just soup made with love, have a taste." Brian slammed his hand on the table, rattling the glasses. "Jesus Christ, Helen, every damn dinner turns into this paranoid crap. If you think we're trying to poison you, then leave. Seriously. Get out. Cram your tinfoil hats and just go." Kelly stood still, her face tight. "You're unbelievable. Do you think you're so important we would waste time trying to kill you? If someone did, it would be a blessing." Emma gasped. Her little hand clutched mine. "Enough," I said. "Enough, Kelly. Enough, Brian." Brian scoffed. "Oh, you want peace now? After accusing your own daughter of trying to kill you?" "I didn't accuse anyone," I said. "I asked a question. But you answered it, loud and clear." Kelly leaned over the table, eyes blazing. "Fine. Maybe someone should. You're 80, you're barely mobile, you complain about everything, and you cost us thousands in meds and care. Maybe this world would be better off with one less bitter old woman sucking the life out of everyone around her." Emma began to cry. I wrapped my arm around her. "Go to your room, baby, it's okay." She shook her head. "But I don't want you to be hurt." "I won't be," I said. "I promise." Kelly sighed dramatically and started clearing plates, muttering under her breath. Brian took his glass of wine and stormed off to the den. The guests stared awkwardly, mumbling excuses as they stood to leave. No one looked at me. I waited until the kitchen was empty. Then I stood up, took the bowl of soup, and carefully poured it into a mason jar I had hidden in my bag under the table. That night, after they had gone to bed, I put on my coat and walked 2 blocks down to Janet's house. She was an old friend, a retired lab tech who still tinkered in her garage with microscopes and chemical tests. She opened the door in her robe. "Helen, are you all right?" I held out the jar. "I need you to test this." She took it slowly. "What is it?" "Soup," I said, "but something is wrong with it. I need to know if I'm crazy, or if I'm just the only one paying attention. Janet frowned but nodded. Come back tomorrow. I'll let you know what I find. I thanked her and turned back toward the house. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from something colder, a knowing that had been whispering at the back of my mind for months now, finally crawling to the front. They thought I was too old, too slow, too dependent. They forgot what silence teaches you, to observe everything and remember everything. They thought I would eat what they served me, swallow it down with gratitude, and disappear quietly like a burden relieved. But I was not done watching, and I was not done fighting. They said the fall was an accident. I said it was the rug. The paramedics said it was my age. The bruises on my hip said otherwise, but no one really asked me. It happened in my little apartment in Lansing, a place I had lived alone in for nearly 20 years. I had just watered my plants and was carrying the kettle back into the kitchen when the floor slipped out from under me, or maybe it was pulled. I remember the sound of my body hitting the stairs, not the pain, just the sound, like a bag of groceries splitting open. After the hospital, Kelly insisted I come live with her and Brian. You can't be alone anymore, Mom. It's not safe. What if next time no one finds you for days? She had said, her voice heavy with concern that felt rehearsed. I moved in, not by choice, out of necessity. At least that is what I told myself then. Within a week, they said I needed supervision. They took my phone, said I was texting strangers too much. They disconnected the landline in my room, told me not to touch the mail, not to answer the door, not to turn on the stove. You forget things, Mom. You're not 20 anymore, Kelly said, with that saccharine voice she used when she wanted to sound like a saint. I was only allowed out of my room for 3 reasons. Meals, bathroom breaks, and to babysit Emma. Everything else, they said, would be managed for me. My medications, my bank account, even my wardrobe. They threw out most of my old clothes, replaced them with elastic pants and loose sweaters. Comfortable, they called it. You keep thinking you're smart, Kelly snapped at me once when I asked to check my bank statements. Surviving a fall does not make you a genius. You're lucky your brain still works. She laughed at her own joke. Brian chuckled too, without looking up from his phone. But my brain did still work. Better than they assumed. At night I stayed awake listening. Brian would get up around 2 or 3 in the morning. He always thought he was quiet. But I heard the creak in the hallway, the shuffle of keys, the door clicking shut. Sometimes he would return before dawn, sometimes not until late morning. Kelly never asked. During the day, she sat in her bathrobe, scrolling on her tablet, clicking through Amazon carts with my credit card linked. I knew it was mine because I saw the statements before they stopped coming to the house. Before they said paper was too messy and switched everything to online. My pension was their playground. They bought gadgets, clothes, delivery food. Not for me, for them. They fed me soup every single day, a separate pot that simmered alone on the back burner. It always smelled faintly metallic, though they said it was bone broth. It's special for your needs, Kelly said. Low sodium, digestible. We add herbs for inflammation. But no one else ate it. Not once. Brian refused soup outright. Emma asked once if she could try it, and Kelly snapped, "That's not for children." I was the only one it was made for, the only one who ever tasted it, and after a while, I stopped tasting anything at all. It started like any other morning. The sun peeked in through the kitchen window, catching the dust that never seemed to settle in this house no matter how much I wiped. Emma sat across from me, her little feet dangling above the floor, her spoon clinking against her cereal bowl in a rhythm that usually gave me comfort. But that morning, she was quieter than usual. She barely touched her milk. She kept glancing at the door, then at me, then back down into her lap. I was folding napkins when I noticed her slip something from her hoodie pocket. A single sheet of paper, crumpled edges, folded once, then twice again. "Don't tell," she whispered. Her hand was small and warm. She slid the paper under the table into mine. I looked at her. She didn't smile, just stared down, like she was waiting for a thunderstorm that had already started. I opened it slowly, expecting another stick figure family or rainbow sun, the kinds of things she always drew for me. But this wasn't that. It was me, slumped over the dining table, my hair in a bun, my house robe, My necklace, the blue one I wore when I missed her grandfather, and above me stood Kelly, unmistakable even in crayon, long red hair and a scowl. She was pouring something from a bottle labeled bleach into a pot. Next to her stood Brian, drawn with his baseball cap and big square shoulders, holding what looked like a giant pen. But it wasn't a pen, it was a needle. A syringe. I felt my mouth go dry. "Emma," I said gently, "what is this, baby?" She looked up, lip trembling. "I saw it." My stomach turned. "Where did you see it, honey?" She didn't speak right away. She pushed her bowl away and whispered, "I was behind the fridge. I dropped my Lego." I nodded for her to keep going. "I saw Mommy pour the stuff in your soup. She told Daddy it would make you stop breathing. But it didn't hurt. She said you'd go to sleep and not wake up and it would be better." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Did she see you?" Emma shook her head. "But I heard her. She said Daddy had something in case it didn't work. In the red box." "The red box?" "The same one Brian kept in the closet and locked with a little padlock. I'd seen it once when the door was open, thought it was just another one of his old army things. I folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into my sweater pocket. You did the right thing, sweetheart," I told her. "Thank you for trusting me." Emma looked like she might cry. "Are you mad at Mommy?" I smiled, even though my teeth ached. "No, baby, I'm not mad. I'm just thinking." That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened my husband's old gardening journal. He'd used it to log every bloom, every inch of rain, every seedling's progress over 30 years. I began my own entries, not about roses, but about poison. Day by day, I wrote what I ate. I wrote down what time they handed me my pills, when I heard Brian leave at night, when I caught Kelly checking my account balances on her phone. And then I began watching. Emma brought me more drawings. One had a tombstone with my name on it, drawn in the front yard. Another showed Brian holding a pillow over someone's face. Someone had a bun and a necklace. "She said it's just a game," Emma whispered. "But I don't like that game." Neither did I. Every morning, Kelly smiled too wide. Every night, my soup was served first. No one else touched it. No one ever tasted it but me. I stopped drinking it. I dumped it behind the shed when no one was looking. I pretended to be full. I said my stomach hurt. I faked stomach cramps and dizzy spells. They chalked it up to age. They were delighted. "Soon," I heard Brian say one night through the heating vent. "She's getting worse." "She's slipping," Kelly whispered back. "We won't have to wait long." But I wasn't slipping. I was documenting. I was remembering. And I was waiting. Because now I knew something I hadn't dared believe before. They didn't just want me gone. They were planning it, and their 6-year-old daughter had told me how. I waited until Thursday. Thursdays were for yoga, at least that's what Kelly told Brian. She always left the house with her mat tucked under her arm and her hair tied in that neat little ponytail that made her look younger than she was. She never came back with sweat, only with receipts. Spa facials, boutique candles, wine that never made it to the family table. Brian left around the same time, usually muttering something about checking on a job site. Emma went to school. I stayed behind. As always, unnoticed, unimportant. That Thursday, I put on my heaviest coat, the wool one I hadn't worn since my husband's funeral. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, tucked the drawing Emma had given me deep into my pocket, and sealed the cooled bowl of soup in a Tupperware container Kelly had bought with my credit card. I even made sure to clean the edges. No one would know it had been touched. I walked the 3 blocks to Janet's place. My feet were slow, but my mind was clear. Janet was one of those people who aged without softening. She had been a lab assistant when we were young, always precise, always blunt. Now she ran her own little side lab from the back of her house, a side hustle in a town where secrets stayed buried unless someone like her chose to dig them up. She answered the door in her bathrobe, her glasses sliding down her nose. "Helen, what the hell?" I handed her the container. "I need you to test this." She didn't ask why, not at first. She just looked at me, then at the bowl, then back at me again. "Come inside," she said. The room smelled like coffee and lemon polish. She cleared a space on the counter and set the soup down. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Bleach," I said simply, "or anything that isn't food." Janet blinked. "You're serious?" I wouldn't walk here in January if I weren't. She opened the container and sniffed. Her face changed immediately. That smells. Off. Metallic. Bitter. I know. You sure you're okay? Not remotely. She sighed and got to work, pulling gloves from a drawer, a pipette from a cabinet, and a testing kit I didn't recognize. I sat on her vinyl kitchen chair, hands folded, not shaking. My heart didn't race. My breathing didn't quicken. I was calm, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I already knew the answer. I didn't come here for discovery. I came for confirmation. An hour passed. Janet said nothing, just moved from sink to kit, from laptop to notebook. Finally, she turned to me. I found sodium hypochlorite, she said. It's consistent with household bleach, and in concentrations far higher than accidental contamination. I closed my eyes. It was in the broth? She nodded. In the soup? In the residuals on the spoon? I'd bet it's in the water you drink, too. Want me to test that next? I shook my head. I already stopped drinking it. She sat down across from me, her face unreadable. Helen, this isn't some nursing home horror story. This is criminal. Do you want me to call someone? I know people. No, I said softly. Not yet, she frowned. Why the hell not? Because they're not finished, I said. They think I'm dying. They think it's working. If I act too soon, they'll just deny it. Say I'm old, say I'm imagining things. I need more. You need to get out of that house. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. I've lived with people trying to break me before. You know that. I can handle it. Janet leaned back in her chair. You always were the quiet one. I nodded. Still am. I left her place an hour later with a manila envelope in my purse. Inside were printed results, photos of the test, a written affidavit from Janet herself. Proof. But I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, I went home, poured the soup down the garbage disposal, and smiled when Kelly asked how I liked the flavor that night. Delicious, I said. Tasted cleaner than usual. She laughed, thinking I was making a joke. I was not. I added the test results to my husband's old journal, taped them in next to Emma's drawings. I made notes about the dosage, the change in taste, the smell. I even added sketches, basic, crude, but enough to paint a picture if I were found dead. Then I waited. I didn't stop them. I didn't warn them. Because sometimes letting someone think they've won is the most dangerous gift you can give them. And I was about to be very, very generous. There was something about the soup that brought it all back, not the taste, because I had long since stopped swallowing it, but the smell, a faint trace of chlorine beneath the broth, a bitterness at the back of my nose. It was the same scent I remembered from another bowl, 2 decades earlier. Different kitchen. Same silence. My husband, Tom, had died in that house. Not suddenly, but not slowly either. It was a Sunday evening in March. Kelly had offered to cook. She had just come home from college that spring and said she wanted to do something special for her father. He's getting old, she had joked, and I've been learning new recipes. She made soup, chicken and rice. She insisted we all try it, but Tom was the only one who finished his bowl. I remember watching him eat, how he smiled at her, proud of her effort. The next morning, he was gone. The official cause of death? Cardiac arrest. The secondary note, non-specific electrolyte imbalance. It was chalked up to age, stress, cholesterol. Nobody questioned it. He was 61. Men died younger all the time. And Kelly, we thought she was grieving. She cried at the funeral. She even read a poem. But now, with Emma's drawing in my journal and Janet's lab results in my purse, I began to wonder. I dug out the old filing box from my closet, the one I had sealed after the funeral and never touched again. It was full of receipts, photos, and condolence cards. And among them was the autopsy report, barely 1 page long. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. Elevated sodium levels inconsistent with diet. Presence of trace chemical compounds, potentially caustic, not typical of post-mortem decay. I remembered asking the coroner about it then. He had waved it off. Sometimes, the chemicals in the embalming process throw off the sample. Back then, I believed him. Now, I called my old lawyer. Gil, I said when he picked up, do you still work with medical forensics? He laughed. Only when someone's buried the truth. I told him what I had found. I told him everything, and then I asked the question I had never dared to ask before. Can an old autopsy be reviewed? He sighed. If there's a cause, and if you're ready for what it might uncover. I was. 2 weeks later, Gil called me back. You were right to wonder, he said. Your husband's toxicology screen was never followed up on, but I had a friend take a second look. He ran a chemical match against modern cleaning agents, and? There was a spike in sodium hypochlorite, he said. Not fatal in itself, but enough to trigger cardiac issues in someone with pre-existing conditions. I sat down. She poisoned him? I said. Looks like it, Gil replied. And given what you've told me about the current soup situation, she might be trying again. I stared at the framed photo of Tom on my nightstand. He had died with his eyes open, slumped in the armchair he loved. We thought it was peaceful. Now I knew better. Kelly had done this before, and she was doing it again. She was only 22 when she killed him, not out of hate, not out of rage, but for money. There had been a policy, a life insurance payout meant to cover college debt and give her a fresh start. Tom and I had added her as a beneficiary when she turned 18, never thinking she would use it before she even graduated. She got $75,000, 0 cents. We never questioned it. She bought a car, paid off her loans, took a semester in Europe, and now, 20 years later, she was reaching for the same prize. Another policy, another quiet death, another empty chair at the table. Only this time, I would not be leaving quietly. This time, I would not be found slumped and still. I would be standing and watching and waiting. They started circling me like vultures not long after I stopped pretending. I could feel it in the air, the tension, the urgency, like they knew I had gotten stronger, sharper, like they felt the clock ticking faster than before. Kelly especially couldn't hide it anymore. Her tone changed. Her fake sweetness had turned bitter. Her patience wore thin every time I asked a question, every time I mentioned the past. Then came the papers. We just want to protect Emma's future, Kelly said, placing the manila envelope on the kitchen table like it was an early birthday present. She's going to need stability if anything, unexpected things happen. It's just a formality, Mom. A transfer of the deed. You'll still live here, of course. Nothing changes. I opened the envelope. It was a revised will, one that moved the house title into a trust for Emma, but written in a way that allowed Brian to manage the property for her benefit. In plain English, they could sell the house the moment I took my last breath. I flipped through the pages slowly, pretending my eyes struggled. You want me to sign this now? Kelly nodded eagerly. Brian already got it notarized. All it needs is your signature. I glanced at Brian, who stood leaning against the fridge, arms crossed. Go ahead, he said. You're not getting any younger. And what if I say no? I asked. He shrugged. Then you'll leave Emma with nothing. Is that what you want? I paused, smiled faintly, and picked up the pen. Of course not, I signed. But not that copy. Because what they didn't know was that 2 days earlier, I had taken a secret trip back to Gil's office. The real will, the one that left the house in full to Emma on her 25th birthday, locked in a protected trust, with Kelly and Brian legally barred from touching it, had already been filed. The signature I gave them was a forgery. On paper, I'd printed myself. The notary was a woman I met at the senior center who owed me a favor, and the manila folder? A decoy. When Kelly clutched it to her chest that night, gloating about how generous I'd been, I said nothing, because by then the real work had already started. Gil had passed everything, Janet's test results, the autopsy review, Emma's drawings, to a friend in the prosecutor's office. They couldn't arrest me without a clear attempt on my life. They needed something in the act, real time, caught in motion. So we waited. Weeks passed. Every meal I acted just fragile enough to convince them I was fading. I faked tremors in my hands, let my spoon clatter once or twice. I dragged my steps and took longer in the bathroom. I let them see me accidentally double dose a pill, though it was just a vitamin. Kelly started whispering more. Brian started checking my room more often. Emma told me, with wide eyes, that they had begun talking about funerals and listing the house. They didn't even bother hiding it anymore. I asked Kelly, one morning, "Do you think I'll make it through the winter?" She looked at me, long and hard, then smiled sweetly. We'll see, won't we? Climax after climax came quietly. The night Kelly switched my pill bottle with a new one, identical on the outside except for the faded label. The afternoon, Brian screamed at Emma for asking why Grandma never ate dinner with them anymore. The morning I found my favorite necklace, the one Tom gave me, snapped in half and left in the trash, and still I said nothing. Because I knew the net was closing. Because I knew they were ready to pounce, but I was ready to strike. They called it a family dinner, but it felt like a funeral before anyone had died. Kelly decorated the dining room with gold streamers and a lopsided welcome spring banner that still smelled of plastic. She had even pulled out the good china, Tom's favorite set, which she had once told me she hated. The table was set for 6, though only 4 of us were expected. Emma wore a pink dress, her hair in tight curls. Brian was in a collared shirt for the first time since Christmas. Kelly wore perfume too strong for the small room. I wore silence. She made a toast before dessert. Of course she did. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she began, lifting a glass of wine. It means a lot, especially after the year we've had. Mom's recovery has been such a blessing. We're stronger now, as a family. United. Brian clapped half-heartedly. Emma stared at her cake. Kelly pulled out a stack of papers from the side drawer. I also thought this would be the perfect time to share something special. Some updates to the family will. You know, just to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward. She gave a dramatic pause. This version ensures Emma is taken care of, and of course, with Brian helping manage the property, everything is protected. My fork stilled on the plate. The room buzzed with artificial cheer. But I said nothing. Kelly continued, flipping to the final page, showing off my signature like a magician revealing her grand finale. It's all official, she said, her eyes glittering. Notarized and everything. That was when the knock came. 3 sharp taps. Not friendly. Kelly blinked. Brian froze. I stood up before either of them could react. I'll get it, I said softly. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood behind it, backs straight, badges polished. Mrs. Helen Parks, I nodded. Is Kelly Harrison present? She's in the dining room, I said. So is Brian McAllister. They exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. Kelly Harrison, Brian McAllister, the taller one announced. You are both under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Kelly's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the tile. Brian stood up too fast, knocking over his chair. What? This is insane! Kelly shrieked. The officer pulled out the warrant, unfolded it slowly. You are also under investigation for the suspected murder of Thomas Parks 21 years ago. Kelly's face turned to chalk. What the hell is this? Brian growled. Who said anything? I walked back into the room, calm and slow. Kelly stared at me like I had just risen from the grave. I looked her in the eye and said, You didn't kill me. She opened her mouth, trembling. I stepped closer. But you did kill your father, and now you're going to answer for it. Emma burst into tears. I picked her up before she could run. I tried to help you, Kelly screamed as the officers cuffed her. I took care of you. You took my soup, I said quietly, and you gave me poison. Brian lunged once, tried to push past the officers, but he was down in seconds. As they dragged them out, Kelly turned back one last time. You think this makes you a hero? She spat. You're nothing, old hag. You're the same old ghost in this house, just louder now. No, I said. Now I'm the one who writes the ending. The door slammed shut, and the house exhaled. The trial ended in less than 2 weeks, but the echoes of it lasted much longer. The courtroom was packed for the verdict. Press, neighbors, even former friends of Kelly's who came to gawk more than grieve. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, while Kelly's lawyer tried his best to paint her as a misunderstood daughter, overwhelmed by caregiving duties. Your Honor, he said, voice tight with rehearsed concern, this is not a monster. This is a woman pushed to the edge by a broken healthcare system, by stress, by a lifetime of emotional neglect. She poisoned her mother, the prosecutor interrupted. You were just violently ill. This sounds like a victim, and she poisoned her father. The only thing broken here is her soul. The judge agreed. Kelly and Brian were found guilty on all charges, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and in Kelly's case, first-degree homicide for the death of my husband, Thomas Parks, 21 years ago. They were each sentenced to life without parole, no appeals, no deals, just silence. I did not cry when this sentence was read. I did not flinch when Kelly looked back at me one last time, her eyes filled with something I could not name. Not hate, not regret, something in between, something hollow. But I did feel one thing, relief. Not because they were going away, because no one else would fall into the same silence I had lived in for 2 decades. After the trial, there were reporters who wanted my story. Some wanted to turn it into a documentary. Others offered book deals. "You're a symbol of justice," one woman told me, a grandma who fought back. But I was not interested in being a symbol. I had spent too much of my life being invisible to suddenly crave the spotlight. I gave one interview to a local reporter named Marcy, who had lost her own grandmother in a nursing home scandal. She was kind. She asked questions, gently. She let me speak without interruption. Then I left the house that held too many ghosts. I moved to Traverse City, into a small, sunlit home that belonged to Margaret, my sister-in-law, and one of the last people on this earth who remembered me before the world wore me down. Margaret had the gift of quiet. She did not ask about the trial, or Tom, or Kelly. She simply opened her door, handed me a hot cup of coffee, and said, "You're home." It was all I needed to hear. Emma came to visit every Sunday. The first Sunday after the sentencing, she brought me a potted plant. "It's called a snake plant," she said. "It's really hard to kill." We both laughed. It was the first time I had seen her really laugh in months. She stayed the whole day, playing cards with Margaret, showing me her school projects. Her drawings had changed. No more tombstones, no more bleach bottles. Now there were sunflowers, lakes, and once, a drawing of me sitting on a rocking chair while she stood next to me holding a law book. I asked her what the book was. She said, "It's for the people I'll help. I want to be a lawyer, like Mr. Gill." "Why?" She looked at me without blinking. "Because no one believed you. Not until they saw the paper, the results, the signatures. I want to believe people like you, the ones who get ignored." I felt something shift in my chest. Pride, yes, but something deeper too. Recognition. She would not become her mother. That much I now knew. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was shaky, frantic. "Mother, I know you think you won. Maybe you did. Maybe you always had the upper hand and I was too blind to see it. But I want you to know, I never meant for it to go that far. I just wanted space, freedom, a life that wasn't about cleaning up your messes. But I see now that maybe I was the mess all along. Tell Emma, tell her I'm sorry. Or don't. It's your story now. Just know I never hated you. I just didn't know how to need you without feeling small." Kelly, I did not write back. I folded the letter, placed it in Tom's journal, between the page that held Emma's first drawing and the toxicology report that reopened his case. I kept it not as evidence, but as a reminder. Sometimes justice is not loud. Sometimes it lives in the cracks between regret and revelation. Life after the storm was not perfect, but it was mine again. In the mornings, I made tea on my own stove. In the afternoons, I walked to the bookstore at the end of the block, where the owner always saved the large print mysteries for me. Margaret and I started attending a weekly knitting group, not because either of us knit well, but because it felt good to sit with other women who had lived long enough to stop pretending. Emma kept visiting. Every Sunday, without fail, on her 12th birthday, she said something I will never forget. We were sitting on the porch watching birds hop along the fence. She said, "You know, I used to think grown-ups always knew what they were doing, but then I saw Mom and Dad make all those terrible choices, and I realized maybe it's not about being sure. Maybe it's just about choosing not to hurt people." I reached for her hand. "That's more wisdom than most people learn in a lifetime," she smiled. "I think I got it from you. One day, years from now, she'll graduate, and when she does, she told me she wants to write something on the inside of her gown, something small, just for her. It will say, 'They thought silence was weakness, but silence remembers, and when it speaks, it does not tremble.' I told her she could write it wherever she wants, because she had lived it, and so had I. And in the quiet of that shared truth, we found something stronger than revenge. We found peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, silenced, or underestimated, I hope you remember this. Silence isn't weakness, it's memory. And one day, memory speaks. On Grandma True Stories, we tell the stories no one else dares to say out loud. Tales of betrayal, quiet revenge, and justice delivered not with noise, but with truth and time. If you believe wisdom has no expiration date, if you know that when a Grandma True Stories, the world should listen, then subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because the quietest women in the room often have the loudest truths. Your story matters. Let's tell it together.